We're going to kick things off with one of the most anticipated presentations, servicing senior living facilities, developing, owning, and managing a portfolio of senior living communities. This is going to be presented by Barry Kaganson, CEO of Aurea. Barry, I'll ask you to switch on your audio and video. I'm sure you'll be let into the session. And this will be a 20 to 25 minute presentation. And we look very much forward to it. Hi, Barry.
Thanks very much. And hi, thanks very much. And thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay? It seems like there's a bit of a delay on my side, or is it just on my side?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, is that okay? Hello?
Yes, that's perfect. You can go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, that's perfect. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry, I couldn't hear you there. Thank you. Okay, so this presentation really is just about servicing senior facilities, get into a couple of issues pertaining to senior living facilities, from what they actually are when we talk about them. But I think very importantly, given this is predominantly a property audience, I think it's quite relevant to start off by perhaps talking about somewhat of a misconception out there that senior living, or what would traditionally in previous times be called retirement villages, and I'll get into that as well a bit later as to why we use a different term. But I think there's a perception out there that this is a property development event or property development business, and I just want to make it clear that it isn't really. While property development and ownership is a critical aspect of running senior living communities, the operating aspects of them are even more critical. So while the property provides the physical underpin to the community, really the services and operations that are overlaid on top of that is the critical part of these communities. And I just wanted to make that point because often it's the domain of it seems to be the domain of property developers who think that they can build a shopping center today, office block tomorrow, and a retirement village the next day. It doesn't quite, in my opinion, it doesn't really work that way. So we're solely focused on senior development and do anything else. We're not active in any other business, and certainly no other aspect of property, which, as I said, is an element of this industry, but it's not the entire thing. So who we are as a business, we develop, own, and manage a portfolio of senior living communities. And really what we're doing is setting a new benchmark in community living for the over 70s. And we provide for the intellectual, emotional, social, and physical needs of our residents. And all these aspects of life are what people in their later years kind of really want to be focusing on and need to be focusing on. And why we say the over 70s, one would, you probably notice a lot of retirement villages out there, talking about the over 50s or the over 55s. I think it's important to note that the global statistic of people moving into continuing care retirement villages is that people generally move in at an average age of 78, and that's a global statistic. And we see exactly the same trend here in our communities in South Africa. So our average age of residents entering our communities is exactly that, 78. And the average age of people living in our communities is 82. And that also accords with a global statistic. So when people talk about the over 50s, I think they're talking about a very different product, because people we don't believe people in their 50s and even early 60s necessarily are candidates for a continuing care senior living community. Our current offering, just to give you a bit of background as to where we operate, we have 4 communities at the moment. One is under construction in Johannesburg, that's Royal View. We have San Sereno in Bryanston. We have Melrose Manor, which is in Melrose in Johannesburg. We've just acquired Woodside Village in Cape Town, that's in the southern suburbs in Rondebosch. We're developing Royal View on the golf course in the Royal Johannesburg Golf Course, which is in Linksfield area. And we have a pipeline over and above what I'm, but obviously we're not talking about that now. So I spoke about senior living versus retirement, and it's an important concept really to be discussing, and that is why do we say senior living or why do we not say retirement? So retirement really is a financial descriptor of somebody. So someone can be 50 years old and retired, and for example 85 years old and still working. So what's the relevance of that? With regard to senior living, the relevance of it is that someone in their 50s, in our view, does not need to be, or probably doesn't want to be, living in a senior living community, notwithstanding the fact that this person might be retired. So what I'm saying is it's a financial descriptor. It doesn't really have an impact, or it doesn't really indicate a stage of your life from a chronological perspective, i.e. from an age perspective. Age certainly does. And with advancing age comes different needs that people have. Whether you're working or not does not necessarily impact on those needs. So for example, people who are older want a more hassle-free life, because the older you get, the more the likelihood of a health change increases. So one needs to be in a position where you know that if something happens to you health-wise and you need additional assistance and care, that's available to you. Now, that may or may not happen whether you're working or not. It's dependent on your age, not dependent on your employment status. And that is why the word retirement, in our view, is a bit of a misnomer. I'll give you an example of one of our residents who's 85 years old. He's an orthopedic surgeon in Joburg, a very well-respected orthopedic surgeon, I might add. And he still works 4 days a week. Now, is he retired? No. Should he be living in a senior living community? Absolutely yes, because it's appropriate to his age. And I think that's a very important concept. So the word retirement is always used. We prefer using the word senior living. And why is that? It's because it's not about retiring, as I said. It's about a different set of needs and lifestyle choices, which people in their later years should find attractive and should find necessary, should find appealing, and should find that it gives them a certain peace of mind, it gives them security, and it talks to their needs of daily living, and it talks to their health requirements that they may have now or that they may have in the future. And that is the important aspect of why we talk about senior living and not retirement. What really is a senior living community? It's a general term that refers to a community which provides different kinds of housing, assistance, and care for older adults. Now, these can be designed to suit any type of lifestyle, and the care and assistance that's provided is quite comprehensive and ranges from nothing. In other words, residents who are completely independent, and I must say that is the vast majority of our residents are completely independent and require little to no assistance or care on a daily basis, but that then traverses the full spectrum all the way through to those who are in assisted living, who are in what is traditionally called frail care, even though we use some different terminology there too. I won't get into it now. And of course, dementia care, which is an issue which is incredibly prevalent in the senior living space, both in South Africa and globally, with increased life expectancies. The prevalence of dementia, especially in people over the age of 80, is quite significant and poses a significant challenge to those who are living with dementia and their families. So within a senior living community, older adults can enjoy an enjoyable, hassle-free life, but with access to a wide variety of amenities and support on site available. And these people, as I said, are typically over 70, and we provide continuing care and assistance, proactive wellness interventions, and these are based on the unique needs of every individual. Traditionally, or I won't say traditionally, I'll say some time ago, a retirement village was generally considered a place where someone went when they were older, and it was almost viewed as in a way, a step down from life outside a senior living community. Whereas what's happening now on a global basis are these communities are becoming far more attractive places to live, and people are moving there out of choice rather than out of necessity. And why is that? It's because even from an independent living perspective, your life is actually enhanced. You have access to a variety of services on a daily basis that you would not have where you're not living in these communities. For example, multiple dining options, coffee shops, restaurants, all on site, maintenance services, concierge services, social and wellness activities, proactive wellness interventions, etc., etc. All these things that one would not have living outside one of these communities, which become quite important as one gets older. A continuing care retirement community really provides the full spectrum of living for older people. That would be fully independent living, as well as certain types of assisted living, all in one place. And assisted living is really assistance to activities of daily living. So that could range from medication management to something as simple as meals, to something as a bit more complex in terms of assistance with personal hygiene and that type of stuff. And of course, there's dementia care. The important thing, though, is if someone moves into a continuing care retirement community, and that's why it's actually called continuing care, is that no matter how someone's needs change, those needs can be catered for within that environment without the person moving, by people who they know and trust and at a cost that they would know moving into these communities. So the point of that is that it becomes more predictable and it becomes more familiar in a way, even before one may need these care and support services. And I must also stress that not everyone needs care and support services during their lifetime. In fact, it isn't even the majority of people who need these care and support services. But certainly, one never knows what's going to happen. So it is critical, in my opinion, it is critical that people start thinking about moving into these communities at, in their mid to late 70s, because the statistic is that about 40% of people over the age of 85 need assistance with 2 or more activities of daily living. So if one thinks about that, nobody plans on not living till 85. So in one's late 70s, one should start considering the possibility of moving into one of these communities, just to have that peace of mind of knowing that if care or support is required, it's available to you. And of course, living independently within those communities is also an option. It's not even an option. It's most people do live independently, and in that regard, one's life is actually enhanced by the multitude of services that are available to residents within these communities. The other thing is often where one has a situation of a couple and one person has a health issue and the other one doesn't, and that person needs specific care and support. Those can be that can all be provided within that community without the couple having to split up. So in previous years, I could say, where you had a standalone health care facility, what often used to happen is the one of the couple would have to move into something like that, and the other one would still be at home. And in that way, the couple was split. Here in a continuing care retirement community, the needs of both people can be addressed within the same environment, and that's obviously very important. So as I said to you, with independent living, I just wanted to explain the difference quickly. Independent living, people live in independent houses or apartments with full access to dedicated staff for services, maintenance, housekeeping, multiple dining options. We also have a variety of exercise, wellness, social and enrichment programs available on a daily basis, but additional support is always on hand. So as I said, this is hassle-free living with a peace of mind of knowing that whatever assistance you need with any aspect of daily life is going to be taken care of at some point. Then we have assisted living, and this is for residents who maybe require a little more, prefer to be in closer proximity to convenient services on offer within the community. And as I said earlier, this can range from something as simple as meals all the way through to assistance with dressing or bathing or personal hygiene, medication management, etc., etc. So it's as much or as little as someone needs. Frail care is essentially similar, which is assisted living, but that is where someone really needs closer monitoring when they're unable to perform multiple activities daily living. Of course, dementia care is something quite different. People with more advanced dementia do need specific type of interventions with specific type of care, which typically isn't the same as what a traditional frail care environment can offer. So that is a specific type of care that is very prevalent in senior living communities overseas, given longer life expectancies and the higher prevalence of dementia as a result. And this is a trend that's playing out across the world. So this is just an indication of the services that are on offer in what we call continuing care retirement communities. So one has independent living. I think I've touched on most of this. Multiple dining options. There's entertainment, and that's an entertainment program that's put on by a team of people on a daily basis. Social engagement, of course, very important as one gets older, and studies have shown a marked improvement in outcomes of people with early stage dementia who have high levels of social engagement, and of course even delaying onset of dementia for those people who spend a lot of time with friends and family. Wellness and gym, of course, everyone understands the importance of keeping mobile, etc., as one gets older. And then, of course, there's assisted living on and care available all the time within these communities as well. Just from a property aspect, so what I've spoken about before really is a lot of operational aspects and understanding of what the environment is that is being created. But of course, these environments are being created by a property and by improvements on that property, and that's where the property aspect comes in. So I'll talk about that a little bit. The first thing is, and this is quite important, is location. So generally, people in their older years want to remain in the same area that they are currently living in, or that their families are living in, which generally are very similar areas anyway. And your feeder area in a new retirement or any senior living community comes from around a 6 to 8 kilometer radius around the site. In other words, comes from the nearby area. So what's the impact of that? The impact of that is that obviously in developing, one needs to look at established suburbs where you have a dense population around that 6 to 8 kilometer radius. That obviously implies that as one goes forward, acquiring large pieces of land within these densely populated areas to do these senior living communities becomes very challenging. And this is not only in South Africa, this is around the world that this happens. So, for example, we own a retirement village in Bryanston, which is built on it was built in the early 1990s on a 13-hectare site. Okay. 13 hectares, to find 13 hectares of land now in Bryanston or in any high demand suburb or in high density suburb currently is incredibly difficult. So the impact of this is that, and this is a trend also that's happened overseas, is a lot of, and this is the second bullet on the screen, how is layout. Location often determines the layout. So if you can't get a huge site like 13 hectares, one has to look at a site in the correct area, which is smaller, which actually takes you more to an apartment, rather than what most people have in their heads when they think about a retirement village, which is very spread out like houses and that type of thing. So the trend actually is to move away from houses, and this is a trend that's played out in every country in the world, is to move away from houses and more to apartment style living with the amenities, because one can then execute this on far smaller pieces of land that are better situated. So the example on the screen there is the development we're doing on the Royal Johannesburg. It's about 122 apartments overlooking the golf course. You can see there it's going to have magnificent. That's about a 2.5 hectare site. Even that is quite challenging to find in a densely populated area in a metropole, but nonetheless, it's certainly much easier than finding a 10 to 13 hectare site or 10 to 15 hectare site, which is what one would need for a house or an estate style senior living community. And those are getting harder and harder to find, not only in South Africa, but anywhere and everywhere around the world. They are moving towards these apartment style communities rather than the old estate style. The operational aspects of this of the senior living space, and this is what I said what I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, is critical. So while people think this is a property business, I just wanted to put on the side of the screen there the operational aspects to understand what businesses are actually being run here within a senior living community. So the property is obviously the underpin, because that's where this all happens. But really what is being run here is a hospitality business. Most of your residents are independent. They need concierge services. They need various services on a day-to-day basis, and that's where the hospitality element comes in. So it covers the food and beverage, and it covers the maintenance, etc., etc. It's pretty much like running a hotel. The only difference between running a hotel and a senior living community is in a senior living community, your guest, obviously they're not guests, they're residents, but your clientele never leave. A hotel, they come, they check in, they check out. In a senior living space, they don't leave. So the important point that I'm trying to make is that your service levels have to be superb all the time, because people are interacting with you in their homes on a daily basis. And these are the bullet points on the left really are the businesses that a senior living operator actually has to run within their broader senior living business. So one's running a hospitality business, a food and beverage, i.e. restaurant business, a maintenance operation, security and response, which is critical for older people, especially the response aspect of it, a wellness business, and that would be exercise and proactive interventions, etc. And of course a care business, which is not quite a hospital or a subacute level of care. Nonetheless, there is a nursing requirement involved in providing that daily care and support. So those are the aspects of the senior living business that are critical, and that often are overlooked when people consider that a senior living environment is maybe a property development play. And that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize here. It is not a property development play. That's a critical part of it. But what's even more critical are those services that are up on the screen at the moment, because that is what experience on a daily basis. That is why they are moving to these senior living communities. And that is what endures in their minds long after the bricks and mortar are built, painted, and occupied. And that's the important point that I was trying to make. Right. This is the development dynamics. This is quite critical. The property developers listening to this would know that in a traditional residential, high-density residential development, 1 to 9, which means your saleable area is about 85 to 90% coverage. You're not saleable, such as corridors, service spaces, basements, whatever it is. That's the traditional residential development. In a continuing care retirement community, because one has such extensive communal areas like, for example, cinemas, restaurants, coffee shops, care centers, lounges, bars, etc., etc., these are all non-saleable areas. And as a result, in a continuing care retirement community, your efficiency ratio drops from 85 to 90 on a standard residential to probably 55 to 75%, which impacts significantly on your development margin. So on new senior living community is very, very low. And one then must ask the question, well, what would be incentivized to build something which is far more but to build non-saleable effectively diminishes their development margin. And this is a very critical aspect of the property side of this business, which I'm going to get into now, and it's a question that often gets asked by people in the property. As most people would know, there's often there's two real ways of building senior living communities or retirement villages. Sorry, not building, of selling senior living communities or retirement villages. And the one is a sectional title basis, and the other is a life rights basis. If one looks at the sectional title basis, considering the amount of non-saleable area one has, one will see that a developer selling on a sectional title basis would have their margin significantly compromised. However, a developer selling on a life rights basis might have their initial development margin compromised. They have an income stream into the future arising from the resale of life rights. And that is critical, because our view is that a sectional title retirement development would often not be as attractive to a developer as a life rights retirement development would be to a developer. But that developer then needs to be an operator into the future in order to reap the benefits of future life right sales. And why do we say that? Because when one's future economic tied to the future resale of life rights, that the operator needs to maximize the value of those life rights that are resold. So that value maximized by ensuring that remains the operator. In English, that one should always have strong demand for one's retirement villages. How would one have strong demand? That they are run very well and that people want to live there. It gets to the third point on the screen, I think is the crux of this, and that is management alignment. On a life rights basis, the owner operator is totally with the resident in that the operator has to ensure of this in order that they can maximize the resale of the life right. The resident in turn gets to ensure that it's optimally run, that is well managed, and are happy. In doing so, the operator enjoys strong demand for that village, realize maximum value into the future from the side of their life rights. And I think that is a conscious of time, so I'm just talking about this in quite hard. I think that's a critical point that people need to understand. A lot of developers look to build these sectional title villages. In my that is not a very option space. I think if one is to be in the senior, to be an operator into the future of one's own rights schemes. Yeah, is there any precedent for this? Is another question. Absolutely. If one looks at where the senior living community industry is probably 30 years ahead of where we are and quite successful, that entire industry is on a life rights model. So that has proven that over the last 30 years that model's been successful. Why? It's attracted the reasonable amount of capital, and the operators who have succeeded are the ones who have provided a product that has been so well received and so that has given them the requisite economic benefit to keep building and to grow the industry. For example, in New Zealand, which is a country of only about 5 million people, about 100,000, if I'm not mistaken, of these units within these type of villages. So I think New Zealand and Australia are typical examples of countries where certainly this model has been rolled out very successfully over the past few decades, and notwithstanding the penetration into these senior markets, they still see a long road ahead and are still developing at pace, whereas the South African market is certainly way behind where they are, with the penetration far less than what by penetration I mean the percentage of target demographic people who've actually living in these communities. That penetration. So their penetration is, not mistaken, between 6 and 8%, whereas South Africa is far lower than that, and they, as I said, they still see potential in their markets, even though they're. And that's pretty much the end of my presentation.
Very much.